What's up, guys? Nature Girl 30 here, and I just want to have like a brief intro to this video. And I don't usually don't do this that often, but Ervin and I actually decided to watch all 3 seasons of Daredevil. I guess after hearing that Daredevil Born Again is going to be coming out on Disney Plus in a few years, so we wanted to watch the whole thing all the way through. But he really wanted me to get into it and actually watch the entire series. And I'm not gonna lie, I kind of backed out from it for a while, but we finished it last year, and now we're into the Punisher. So the review, or kind of I guess you can probably say maybe a throwback review, something like that. We're just gonna briefly talk about all 3 seasons, seasons 1, 2, and 3, and also a little bit of the Punisher in there now that we're kind of getting into it, but not too much into detail. There might be a video in the future, but since it's so long, it was actually like 43 minutes of recording. I'm gonna try to at least cut it into 2 parts. Part 1 is just gonna be him introducing himself and telling everyone, what we were like, how we were watching all 3 seasons of Daredevil, and then he has questions that he asked me, and it's recordings that was done on a phone. So if it sounds a bit disjointed, it's because we couldn't really try to get a conference video or a conference call working. So we actually recorded it on Facebook Messenger, and he was able to use his phone to kind of piece together my comments from the questions that he asked me and his comments. So if it sounds a bit off, it's mainly because we were recording it from Facebook Messenger. We didn't really do it from a conference call. So I just want to put that out there. But yeah, this is our own personal view after us watching it together, what our take is. And it's going to be a second viewing for Ervin, because he hasn't seen it in a while. So it's going to be our own personal takes about Daredevil seasons 1 through 3, as well as the Punisher. So I'm going to try to break it down and try to cut it in half so it won't be too long. But I just want to give you guys a quick synopsis about the video, and also if it sounds a bit disjointed because of our, I guess because of how our answers would probably sound. So I'm just putting it out there. But anyway, guys, without further ado, this is our throwback review of Daredevil seasons 1 through 3, as well as the Punisher. Enjoy.
Hello folks, my name is Ervin Griffin, and I'm here with Nature Girl 30. And recently over Christmas, I got her a deluxe trade paperback of some of Daredevil's best comic books, reprints rather, during the Frank Miller era. And we recently finished watching the old Netflix series on Disney Plus. And I was just wanting Nature Girl's view on it and view on Daredevil in that series. Of course, I've followed him from the comic books to live action. Of course, my first experience with him on live action was in a film called Trial the Incredible Hulk in 1989. It was a TV movie, and playing Matt Murdock was a man named Rex Smith. And contrary to what people believe about Frank Miller being the first to make the all-black ninja suit, actually Rex Smith wore it years before Frank Miller created it. Frank Miller created it specifically for his limited series with John Romita Jr. called Daredevil, the Man Without Fear. And in that, he premiered his own version of the black ninja suit. But the black ninja suit was actually around way before that, and Rex Smith is the first one to wear it. Of course, several years later, and of course after a couple of cartoon appearances, both on Spider-Man the Animated Series and the Fantastic Four Animated Series in the 90s, he would appear again via Ben Affleck in the 2003 make of Daredevil, which I would highly recommend, but I would also recommend it in its director's cut. It's a much better film, and it's actually the original way they wanted to release it. So Regina, what did you think on a Daredevil, the Netflix series, and also what did you think of the book I sent you? And I guess finally, I guess it's not one question, it's three, but I wanted to know your opinion on Daredevil 2003 because we did watch that a couple of years ago in its uncut form.
Okay. Starting off with the comic, I'm not gonna lie, I never really had time to sit down and read it. I've been really busy lately. But now that I had a chance to be off of work, I had an opportunity to sit down and read a few pages from it. And clearly, from the first few pages that I've read, I see why you like it. It actually got me hooked after page 2. And this is the one that I got started on first, because you actually sent me Daredevil Visionaries, and this was done by Frank Miller, and this is the volume 2. I actually started with Elektra. And honestly, I see that's probably not the one that got you hooked, but I started to like it after page 2. Not only did I like the artwork, I like how detailed it was when it came to the writing. It really did make me picture the atmosphere. Daredevil was a little different. He wasn't as dark starting off in the comics from the Elektra. I guess from the issue with Elektra in it. He didn't start off that dark, not as dark as the Netflix series. He started off more like a detective, not so much like a detective, but he was like, I want the facts and I want the facts now type of person. And with Elektra, she seemed like more of a survivor than she was just being completely insane as she was in the Netflix series. I just got the fact that she was more of a survivor. She was a bounty hunter. She had to get this money. That's what I got from her for maybe, I think it was page 4, which I saw her on. And that's what I got from her at first. I really got hooked on page 2. And now that I have some time, a little bit of time, I'm going to definitely sit down and finish the rest. Well, at least maybe the first few issues that was in there. I want to at least get to the Kingpin. And I think the Kingpin is issue 170. I want to at least get to the Kingpin because the Kingpin is one of my favorite villains.
Yeah, may I note, first thing with Daredevil in the Frank Miller run. Prior to Frank Miller, Daredevil was a street level superhero, and he was more like Spider-Man Light in that he was different, but at the same time, he had similar traits to Peter Parker, except he was blind and he was written decidedly older than Peter. Whereas Peter was a teenager becoming a man, Matt Murdock was a grown man in his late 20s, early 30s, who had actually been Daredevil for quite some time before Peter even became Spider-Man, ironically. But as for Elektra, as you'll see as it goes on, you see how he met her, which a lot of inspiration from that issue is put into the series. And as for the Kingpin, I think it was Frank Miller that actually named him Wilson Fisk. Because before that, I don't even think he had a name. He was just called the Kingpin. He wasn't much better than one of those James Bond films you would see during the Sean Connery run, like Dr. No or the Goldfinger. He wasn't much more than that. He was almost like Jack. I think Frank Miller described him once that the attitude towards him was like he was the Jackie Gleason of villains during that time. Frank Miller took him and made him pretty much what we know now, the Kingpin we know today. Whereas before, he was just a generic gangster type villain. And I should note, I'm sure a lot of Marvel Comics fans know this, Kingpin started off as a Spider-Man villain. As I said earlier, he started off as a Spider-Man villain. And he wasn't much bigger than, say, Hammerhead or some of the other gangster villains that Spider-Man would occasionally take on. He certainly wasn't colorful. I think up until the Kingpin, I think the most dangerous villain Daredevil had was actually Bullseye. And Bullseye was prior to Frank Miller taking over the book. So, so in that regard, Frank Miller is responsible for the development into much of what we came to know in both Spider-Man the Animated Series and Daredevil, both the motion picture and the Netflix series. He's kind of influenced a lot of what we know now with all those characters. Although, to be fair, in the 2003 film, Elektra was a departure from the Elektra we came to know. She was a bit of a departure from that. Of course, that Elektra was played by Jennifer Gardner.
For the movie that came out in the early 2000s, I'm not gonna lie, I'm probably the only person that loves the theatrical cut. We did see the uncut version, but I still prefer the theatrical cut. Maybe it's because of the love affair between Elektra and Daredevil. I'm not gonna lie, I'm a shipper. I ship anything that moves to a certain degree, especially if it makes sense. My homeboy Laurel, who I see as one of my nephews, we're both shippers. He gets it. Like, we're both shippers. But I really shipped Elektra and Daredevil hard in the movie, and I think that's why I defend it so much, because of the love story, and especially My Immortal really did fit in that film. But I know the theatrical cut wasn't so much about the love affair. It was more about they had the original plot, and then they had a secondary plot behind that. And I think it was more, if I can remember, and I know you'll probably remind me, or at least let me know, it was more focused on the secondary plot than it was on the primary one. But it still wasn't bad, by no means. It wasn't bad. But I preferred the theatrical cut, mainly because of the love story. Maybe I'm a big sap at heart, maybe that's what it is. But I also really did enjoy the Kingpin that was played by Michael Clarke Duncan, the late Michael Clarke Duncan, God rest his soul. Now, of course, when it comes to race swapping, it's annoying as all get out. Seriously, I hate it because people make people black for the sake of, or Hispanic or Asian for the sake of, and don't really give a legit reason on why they did it. But in this case, when in the early 2000s, none of that really mattered. It wasn't a big focus on gender and race. It was just whether or not that individual was able to portray the character very well. That's why I don't mind reimaginings. I don't mind reimaginings. I don't like reboots, and I don't like remakes, because they're just taking something, adding something new in there, but explaining the same story. While reimaginings kind of give a different twist to it. When it comes to the Kingpin, it was more of a reimagining to me, because Michael Clarke Duncan came off as the black version of Lex Luthor. That's what I loved about him. But I know he was that same way. He was really charming on both ends, both the uncut version as well as the theatrical cut. But I loved that version of the Kingpin. And Bullseye was incredibly fun. And I think he was played by Colin Farrell. Colin Farrell was like, he had so much fun playing Bullseye. Like, you can tell he was enjoying himself. And I loved that version of Bullseye. He wasn't as insane as the one in the Netflix series, and I'm gonna get to that. But I honestly did love that version of Bullseye because he was so cartoony but fun at the same time, and I enjoyed him too. But mostly I love the theatrical cut more because of the love story. Even though the uncut version was not bad, I just really loved the love story, because I really did ship Matt Murdock and Elektra really hard. That's just me. Maybe I'm just a big old sap.
I think you and I are different when it comes to the theatrical cut. Was definitely more of a love story than the original version. The original version was a crime story, and honestly, I don't mind a love story being there, because I watch Law and Order SVU and Law and Order Organized Crime every week, and there's always that specter of Captain Olivia Benson and Detective Elliot Stabler, going all the way back to their early days on Law and Order SVU, which that's another discussion for another time. So I don't mind one, and it was a natural love story because both Matt Murdock and Elektra were both free spirits, and they both didn't let their circumstances shackle them and prevent them from living life. And as for Bullseye, yeah, the one in the 2003 film was definitely more fun than the one in the Netflix series. The one in the Netflix series he was closer to the comic book one, but the comic book one is a psycho. I mean, Colin Farrell's version was a psycho as well, but he was more fun. He was a lot more fun than Bullseye. I mean, you didn't know whether he would give you 100 or kill you. I mean, more than likely he'd kill you, but you could never be too sure with him. Whereas the Bullseye in the Netflix series, oh yeah, if you're in his crosshairs, you're dead. You're dead. As for the Kingpin played by Michael Clark Duncan. The Vincent D'Onofrio version in the Netflix series is definitely more on point, character-wise, but let's be honest. Which one would you be more willing to tangle with? A white balding guy who admittedly is a big dude, but then you got this giant in Michael Clark Duncan. You probably would leave Michael Clark Duncan alone. And he did get the basic character of the Kingpin. And of course, a lot of people don't realize Kingpin didn't come from money. He was a street dude just like Matt Murdock. And then I remember in an interview, Michael Clark Duncan said that's why he was able to relate to the Kingpin, even though he was white, because he was he came from the streets. He came from the hood. Just like Michael Clark Duncan came from the hood. And the fact that, he was a white man didn't matter. Because he came up poor just like he did. So he could relate to a lot of things with that. That's why I think he was able to play him. I think how dangerous he is very much more on display in the uncut version than in the theatrical. Theatrical, you get a small taste of what he can do, whereas the uncut one, you really get a taste of what he could do. I think the dangerous aspect is amplified by 10 in the Netflix series, but you definitely get a small taste. And a lot of people knocked Daredevil 2003. I didn't think it was a bad film. Even Charlie Cox, who gets a lot of praise for his interpretation of Daredevil and Matt Murdock, even Charlie Cox has defended Ben Affleck, saying that his version was good, he just didn't have the greatest script. But even he has come out and defended him.
Hey guys, this is actually part 1 of this video. I know that I said that we were going to go into our actual review in this video, but I am breaking it up into 2 parts because I don't want it to go on for too long. I forgot about the 3 questions that Ervin asked me, but yes, we're going to go into further detail in part 2, talking about how we feel about the characters as well as the actual shows themselves of part 1. Part 2, seasons 1, 2, and 3, as well as part of The Punisher. We'll talk about that in part 2. So I hope that I didn't really throw you guys off with that. I actually forgot when I recorded the intro. And I just want to let you guys know it's going to be in part 2. So if you're interested, stay tuned for that. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. And I will talk to you guys later. Peace out.